In the heart of the Zenthri Empire, where twin suns painted the sky in molten gold and deep violet each dawn, stood the celestial spire, a towering palace carved from living crystal that pulsed with ancient energy. Its halls shimmered like frozen lightning, stretching upward into the clouds, guarded by silent sentinels clad in armor forged from star metal. At its peak, upon a throne woven from the roots of the first tree in the universe, so the legend said, sat Empress Vera of House Zyn, ruler of 7 galaxies and mistress of the Void Crown. She was tall, regal, her skin a soft emerald green like moss under moonlight, her long hair as white as fresh-fallen snow on distant ice planets. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed faintly silver, capable of seeing not just your face, but the echo of your soul. She had ruled for 3 centuries with wisdom and iron grace, feared by rebels, adored by loyalists, and mourned by no one, until today. It was during the Grand Assembly of the United Systems, a rare gathering where ambassadors from over 200 worlds came to pledge allegiance or argue petty disputes, that everything changed. The air inside the grand audience chamber hummed with translation fields and diplomatic tension. Robotic attendants floated silently, serving drinks distilled from nebula mist, while delegates argued about trade routes and quantum rights. And then, through the massive double doors of iridescent alloy, he entered, the human envoy from Earth, a planet so insignificant it didn't even have a proper galactic rating. His name was Joran Tully, a man chosen not for strength or intellect, but because he was the only diplomat who hadn't fainted during hyperspace travel. He wore a plain gray suit, slightly wrinkled, his dark hair combed back in a way that suggested effort but not success. He carried no weapons, bore no title of war, and walked with the cautious shuffle of someone who still couldn't believe aliens were real, let alone that he was standing in their most sacred hall. Joran didn't mean to catch anyone's attention. In fact, he'd been instructed to remain quiet, nod politely, and avoid eye contact with anything that had more than 2 eyes. But as he stepped forward to deliver Earth's modest tribute, a sample of blueberry jam and a handwritten letter from the Secretary of Peace, something shifted in the room. A hush fell, not because of the jam, though several insectoid delegates leaned in curiously, but because of what followed. A soft warm scent drifted through the air, woody, spiced, with a hint of something sweet, like old books and cinnamon tea left by a window on a rainy day. It wasn't artificial. It wasn't part of any protocol. It was simply Joran, who had, unknowingly, dabbed on a cologne his grandmother had made him years ago from a recipe passed down through generations of bakers and gardeners. Grandma Mag's Miracle Mist, she called it. Smells like safety, she'd said. And also like you're not about to steal my purse. Empress Vera stiffened. Her fingers, which had been idly tracing the spiral carvings on her throne's armrest, froze mid-motion. Her breath caught. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward the source of the fragrance. Her silver eyes locked onto Joran, who at that moment was trying not to sneeze from the pollen shed by a floating floral delegate from Florax 9. The Empress rose, not with the usual calculated grace, but with sudden urgency, as if pulled by invisible strings. The court gasped. No one stood when the Empress stood unless commanded. Guards tensed. One particularly jumpy reptilian officer nearly fired his plasma lance before being elbowed by his partner. Vera descended the dais, her long silk robes whispering against the crystal steps. She moved like a storm wrapped in elegance, drawing closer until she stood directly before Joran, who now looked like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a meteor. She inhaled deeply once, twice, then closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they shimmered. Not with anger, not with curiosity, but with something far more dangerous, memory. "You smell," she began, her voice low, resonant, echoing slightly as if spoken through water. "Like him." Joran blinked. Like who? I mean, I don't know anyone here. I've never even left Ohio until last week. Well, except for that time I went to Toronto for a concert, but that barely counts." "Not who?" she interrupted softly. "How? You smell like him. Like Kalin." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Even the ambassador from Glimzer, a species that communicated entirely through interpretive dance, paused mid-pirouette. Kalin Zyn was not a name spoken lightly. He had been the Shadow Dagger, the Emperor Consort, the deadliest assassin in galactic history, and the only man the Empress had ever loved. He had died 20 years ago, betrayed by rebel forces during the siege of Xandar, when the separatist faction known as the Crimson Veil stormed the northern spire and poisoned the royal air vents. Kalin had discovered the plot too late. Instead of fleeing with the Empress, he stayed behind, sealing the chambers from the inside while she escaped through the hidden quantum tunnel. He suffocated alone, knowing the Empire would survive because of him. His body was never recovered. Only his dagger remained, embedded in the throat of the rebellion's leader. And now this human smelled like him. Tears welled in Vera's eyes. Actual tears, clear and glistening, rolling slowly down her green cheeks like dew on leaves. The court froze. Some thought it was a trick. Others believed it was a sign from the ancients. The robotic historian assigned to record the event short-circuited from emotional overload and began reciting poetry about lost love in 12 languages simultaneously. Joran, utterly bewildered, reached out instinctively, then pulled his hand back like he'd touched a hot pan. "Your Majesty, are you okay?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. "I can, stop wearing the cologne? I think there's still some wipes in my bag. My mom packed them just in case. She also packed peanut butter crackers. Not sure if you want one." But Vera didn't laugh. She simply stared at him, her expression caught between sorrow and something else. Recognition, perhaps, or the strange ache of déjà vu. "You remind me of nothing," she whispered. "And yet, you smell of everything." She took another step closer, lifting a delicate hand to hover near his collar. Not touching, just breathing in the scent that had unlocked a vault of grief buried deep within her. He wore no perfume, nothing artificial. But after missions, after blood and fire, he would return. And he always smelled like this. Like warmth. Like home. Like a promise kept. Joran swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry he's gone. That sounds really awful. I mean, I've only ever lost a hamster, and that was mostly because I forgot to close the cage. But still, I get it. Loss is hard. Especially when people die saving entire empires. That's, above my pay grade. A small, unexpected sound escaped the Empress. Half sob, half laugh. "You are ridiculous," she murmured, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. A speck from a backwater world, dressed like a confused accountant, smelling like a ghost. "And yet you make me feel something I haven't felt in decades. Not sadness, not anger, just memory. Pure, unfiltered memory." Around them, the tension eased slightly. The guards lowered their weapons. The ambassador from Florax 9 resumed sneezing pollen. The robot poet continued its lament in Klingon-accented iambic pentameter. But the moment had shifted. Something fragile and profound had passed between them. Unplanned, uninvited, but undeniable. Later, in the private solarium overlooking the capital city of Zenthal, where glowing spires pierced the twilight and aerial skimmers zipped like fireflies between towers, Joran sat across from the Empress, sipping a beverage that tasted suspiciously like melted crayons but was apparently a ceremonial honor. They were alone, save for 2 silent guards stationed at the arched entrance and a curious floating orb that recorded everything for the Imperial archives. "You must think me weak," Vera said, gazing out at the skyline. An Empress brought to tears by assent. "What kind of ruler am I?" Joran set his cup down carefully. "I think you're human. Well, alien. But you know what I mean. Grief doesn't care how powerful you are. My dad died when I was 10. Car accident. For years after, every time I smelled motor oil and rain, I'd start crying. Didn't matter where I was, in class, at a birthday party, once during a school play where I was playing a tree. Just boom. Tears. People thought I was allergic to something. But it was just him. He worked at a garage. Smelled like that all the time." Vera turned to him, her expression softer now. "You understand, then. It's not the death that hurts most. It's the little things. The way someone walks. The sound of their laugh. Or the way they smell after a long day. Those are the memories that ambush you. They don't warn you. They just appear." Joran nodded. "Yeah, like emotional ninjas." She smiled faintly. "Emotional ninjas. I like that." Silence settled between them, comfortable this time, not awkward. Outside, the second sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. A minor disturbance in the lower districts, probably smugglers or rogue drones. Routine. Then the alarm sounded. Not the small ones. The big ones. The ones that made the walls vibrate and the lights flash crimson. The kind that meant either an invasion, a black hole breach, or something far worse. Vera was on her feet instantly, her grief replaced by cold authority. "Report!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The floating orb chirped rapidly, projecting a hologram above the table. Security footage from the eastern perimeter. Figures in black tactical suits, no insignia, no IDs, moving with precision through the palace gardens. Energy blades humming, guards falling without sound. And at the center of it all, a man in a hooded cloak, his face obscured, moving with unnatural speed. Too fast for human, too precise for mercenary. The Crimson Veil. Vera breathed, her fists clenching. They've returned. Joran's stomach dropped. Wait, the guys who killed your husband? They're here? Now? Like here? In the palace. They seek revenge, she said, already striding toward the door. Or perhaps they seek me. Either way, they will not leave alive. Okay, but shouldn't we, evacuate? Call for backup? Hide in a panic room with snacks and bad movies? Vera stopped and turned to him. I do not hide, Joran Tully. I rule. And when threats come to my home, I meet them with fire. Before he could protest, she pressed a small device into his palm. A smooth, oval stone that pulsed faintly blue. This is a resonance beacon. If the fighting reaches this level, activate it. It will open a quantum tunnel to the sanctuary beneath the city. Take it. Use it. Do not be a hero. Then she was gone, sweeping down the corridor like a storm given form, her guards falling in step behind her. Joran stood there, holding the stone, heart pounding. He looked at the hologram still hovering in the air, the cloaked figure moving like shadow given muscle. He thought of his mom's voice saying, "Don't get involved, Joran. Just smile, nod, and come home safe." He thought of Grandma Mag's cologne, of the hamster he'd forgotten to feed, of the fact that he still hadn't tried the blueberry jam. And then, without knowing why, he ran after her. The palace transformed as he chased the echoes of battle. Hallways once serene with soft light and gentle music now echoed with the crackle of energy weapons and the shouts of soldiers. Panels exploded. Gravity fluctuated in patches, making him stumble like a drunk on a trampoline. He ducked behind a statue of a six-armed philosopher king as a plasma bolt seared past, melting the floor where he'd just been standing. He found her in the Hall of Echoes, a vast chamber where the walls were made of tuned crystal that reflected not images, but emotions. Vera was locked in combat with the cloaked figure, the leader of the rebels. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, blades flashing, sparks flying. Around them, the walls shimmered with waves of rage, sorrow, determination. Joran could feel the emotions pressing against his skin. He shouldn't have been there. He knew that, but he also knew he couldn't leave. Not now. Then, in a blur of motion, the rebel disarmed the Empress, sending her blade skittering across the floor. He raised his own weapon, a jagged obsidian knife etched with ancient runes, and lunged. Joran didn't think. He acted, still clutching Grandma Mag's cologne bottle, which he'd somehow kept in his pocket the whole time. He hurled it with all his might. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even full. But it flew true, shattering against the rebel's helmet in a spray of glass and fragrance. The effect was instantaneous. The rebel froze. His shoulders stiffened. His breath hitched. The obsidian knife trembled in his grip, because he, too, had smelled that scent before. Slowly, painfully, he reached up and removed his helmet. Beneath it was a face lined with scars and time, but unmistakable. Silver-white hair, deep-set eyes the color of dying stars. A jagged mark across his left cheek, the same one Kalin Zyn had received during the Battle of the Rift. Vera staggered back, her voice a broken whisper. Kalin, the man, Kalin, looked at her, his expression torn between fury and unbearable pain. You left me, he said, his voice rough, like stone grinding against stone. You ran. I sealed the chamber. I held them off. I waited for rescue, but no one came. I was trapped for days in that tomb, breathing poison, screaming until my voice broke. I was found by scavengers, barely alive. They rebuilt me, but by the time I returned, you had declared me dead. You had moved on. You had forgotten. I mourned you, Vera cried, tears streaming anew. I lit the eternal flame. I carved your name into the heartstone. I did not forget. I thought you were gone. You never looked, Kalin snarled. You never searched. I was told your body was vaporized, that no trace remained. And yet here I stand, he said, stepping forward, flesh and bone and rage. And you, he pointed at Joran. You wear his scent like a mockery. Did you plan this? To lure me here? To finish what the rebels started? Joran held up his hands. Whoa, whoa, buddy. I didn't plan anything. I'm from Cleveland. I sell insurance. Well, I did. Now I think I'm a galactic emotional trigger. This cologne was a gift. I didn't even know it smelled like your dead husband. Or, well, not dead husband. Which, by the way, congrats on surviving. That's impressive. Kalin stared at him, then at Vera, then at the shattered remains of the bottle on the floor, its lingering fragrance curling through the air like a ghost. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from the shadows, more figures emerged, rebels, yes, but also others. Soldiers in tattered royal armor. Civilians with haunted eyes. A woman stepped forward, her face familiar from old imperial records. Lyra, Kalin's younger sister, believed dead in the same attack. We were all left behind, she said, her voice trembling. Hundreds of us. Trapped. Forgotten. While the Empire celebrated your survival, Empress, we suffered. We survived. And we waited. Not just for revenge, but for acknowledgement. For someone to say, you mattered. You were not abandoned. Vera looked around at the faces, scarred, weary, angry. Faces she had thought lost. Faces she had grieved. And now they were here, alive, and blaming her. Her shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in realization. I failed you, she whispered. All of you. I believed the reports. I trusted the commanders. I never questioned. And in my grief, I closed a chapter one should have investigated. Kalin's grip on the knife loosened. You loved me, he said quietly. I know you did. But love is not enough if it does not act. No, Vera agreed. It is not. Joran, still standing awkwardly to the side, cleared his throat. So, what now? Are we killing each other? Hugging? Starting a support group? Because I've got pamphlets on grief counseling back on Earth. Also, someone should really clean up this glass. It's a hazard. A beat of silence. Then, unexpectedly, Kalin laughed. A raw, broken sound, but genuine. Vera looked at him, then at Joran, and despite everything, a small smile touched her lips. We are not killing each other, she said, stepping forward. Not today. There has been enough death in the name of vengeance. Now we listen. And so, in the Hall of Echoes, where the walls shimmered with the weight of unspoken pain, the Empress of the Zenthri Empire knelt. Not in surrender, but in humility, and extended her hand to her lost husband, to her forgotten people, to the truth she had avoided for too long. Joran Tully, the man from Ohio who smelled like cinnamon and old books, stood quietly to the side, wondering if Earth would accept blueberry jam as a peace offering upon his return, or if he'd accidentally started a revolution instead. The days that followed were unlike any in the long history of the Zenthri Empire. The palace, once a fortress of silence and protocol, now buzzed with voices. Angry ones, sorrowful ones, healing ones. Meetings were held not in grand chambers behind closed doors, but in open courtyards where survivors of the old rebellion sat beside royal advisors, former enemies sharing waterfruit and stories beneath the twin suns. Empress Vera had issued a decree. No more secrets. No more unmarked graves. No more ghosts buried beneath ceremony. Kalin remained in the palace not as a prisoner, not yet as a consort, but as a man caught between two lives, one lost, one uncertain. He wore no armor now, only a simple tunic of deep blue, the color of the night sky before dawn. His body bore the marks of years spent surviving on forgotten worlds, scars like cracked stone, cybernetic enhancements fused into his bones from scavenger medicine. But his eyes, though hardened, still held flickers of the man Vera had loved. The man who used to bring her wild star blossoms from the cliffs of Xandar after every mission. The man who whispered jokes in ancient Zenthri to make her laugh during council meetings. They did not embrace at first. They did not speak of love. Instead, they walked. Every morning, as the first sun crested the horizon, they met in the Garden of Whispers, where bioluminescent vines curled around silver trellises, and the air hummed with the songs of tiny crystal-winged birds. They walked in silence at first, side by side, careful not to touch, careful not to look too long. Then came the questions. Why didn't you search? Kalin asked one morning, his voice quiet, not accusing, but raw. Vera stopped beneath a tree whose leaves shimmered like liquid silver. I was told your chamber collapsed completely, that the poison had vaporized everything. The High General swore it on the Void Crown. I lit the flame of the fallen. I grieved. And then, I ruled. The Empire needed strength, not a weeping widow. He nodded slowly, And when you smelled that human scent? She looked away, toward the distant spires. It was like time tore open, like my heart remembered what my mind had been forced to forget. I thought I was losing control, but maybe I was finally regaining it. He turned to her then, really looked at her, for the first time since he'd removed his helmet. You aged, he said softly. So did you, she replied, reaching out instinctively, then pulling back. But not in the way I expected. I imagined you frozen in time, perfect in death. Not this, not real, not scarred, not alive. A faint smile touched his lips. Disappointed, relieved, she whispered, terrified, overwhelmed, but never disappointed. And just like that, something shifted. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but like the slow unfurling of a flower in spring. Meanwhile, Joran Tully found himself in a situation he could never have predicted. Declared an ambassador of unintended harmony by royal decree, a title he suspected was made up on the spot. He was given temporary quarters in the East Wing, fed meals that tasted like poetry and occasionally moved on their own, and assigned a personal robotic aide named Glip who communicated entirely through interpretive beeps and dramatic hand gestures. Earth, upon receiving his report, sent via quantum pigeon, a method Joran still didn't understand, declared him a national hero and promptly forgot about him again, except for Grandma Mags, who framed his holographic image and placed it next to her prize-winning zucchini. Joran didn't mind. For the first time in his life, he mattered somewhere. He wasn't just the quiet insurance clerk who got nervous during staff meetings. He was the man whose cologne had stopped an assassination. The man who had stood between an empress and a blade. The man who smelled like love and loss and second chances. He spent his days helping the reconciliation efforts, mediating disputes, translating emotional outbursts, and introducing traumatized alien warriors to the wonders of peanut butter. Is this paste of crushed nuts a sacred offering? One warrior asked solemnly after eating an entire jar. Joran told him yes. Felt right. One evening, as the second sun painted the sky in shades of rose and indigo, Joran found Vera and Kalin standing together on the sky balcony, overlooking the capital. They weren't speaking, just standing close, shoulders almost touching, watching the city lights flicker on like stars born anew. You two look good, Joran said, approaching cautiously, holding 2 mugs of something called galactic cocoa that Glip insisted would mend souls. Vera glanced at him, then at Kalin, who gave a small nod. We've begun remembering, she said. Not just the good times, the hard ones too, the arguments, the fears, the times we doubted each other. Love isn't just joy, Joran. It's also repair. Kalin added. She apologized for not searching. I apologized for not finding a way to contact her. We're working on it. Joran handed them the mugs. That's basically marriage from what I've seen. 2 people trying not to ruin everything while pretending they know what they're doing. That earned a real laugh, from both of them. But peace, even when earned, is never permanent. 3 nights later, the alarms returned. Not from within, from above. A massive warship, charcoal black, shaped like a jagged tooth, emerged from hyperspace and hovered over the capital. No insignia, no communication, just silence. Then, a single transmission, cold and mechanical. The Crimson Veil was a symptom. We are the cure. The weak must fall. The old order ends. The Zesari Collective, a fanatical regime from the Outer Rim, sworn to purge all emotion from leadership, believing grief and love made rulers vulnerable. They had watched. They had waited. And now, seeing the Empress weakened by reunion, by mercy, by feeling, they struck. Vera called her generals. Kalin suited up, not in rebel gear, but in the armor of the Shadow Dagger, reforged by royal smiths. Joran, despite being told to stay behind, showed up at the command center wearing a fireman's helmet he'd found in storage, and carrying a mop he claimed was a ceremonial staff of peace. You can't come, Vera told him firmly. I'm not here to fight, Joran said. I'm here to remind you why you shouldn't have to. Kalin studied him, then nodded. Let him come. Sometimes the softest voice cuts deepest. The battle that followed was not one of brute force, but of will. The Zesari drones descended, faceless, silent, moving in perfect, soulless formation. They did not scream. They did not hesitate. They simply advanced, dismantling defenses, overwhelming soldiers with cold precision. Their leader, a towering figure encased in obsidian exo-armor, challenged Vera directly. You rule with sentiment, the Zesari commander intoned. Sentiment is decay. You mourned a dead man. Now you embrace a broken one. You let an insignificant creature sway you with scent. You are unfit. Vera stood tall, Kalin at her side, Joran just behind. I rule with memory, she said. With love. With regret. With the courage to admit I was wrong. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, then your strength is hollow. Because you do not know what it means to lose, to grieve, to hope. And that, Kalin added, igniting his blade, is why you will fail. The final clash was swift. Not because of superior weapons, but because of unity. Vera fought with the fury of a queen defending her home. Kalin moved like shadow and vengeance reborn. And Joran? He did not raise a weapon. Instead, as the battle raged, he pulled out a small speaker, one of the few earth items he'd brought, and played a song old, gentle, a lullaby his mother used to sing. He cranked it up, blasting it through the battlefield comms. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. The effect was absurd, hilarious, and devastatingly effective. The Zesari drones hesitated. Their systems glitched. Emotion-dampening fields overloaded. How could they process this? A melody? A voice full of warmth? A sound that carried love across light years? Even the commander staggered, his helmet flickering. Stop! Stop this noise. It is illogical. It is painful. It's called feeling, Joran shouted over the music. Try it sometime. In that moment of confusion, Vera and Kalin struck. Not to kill, but to disable. The warship's core was destabilized. The drones retreated. The threat passed. Silence returned. Then slowly, laughter. Back in the palace, as medics tended to the wounded and citizens lit celebration lanterns in the streets, Vera stood with Kalin on the balcony once more. This time she took his hand. He didn't pull away. We could leave, he said quietly. Just you and me. No empire. No duty. No ghosts. She looked at him, then at the city below, alive with light and song. And what about the people who survived because we faced our past? Who found hope because we chose to remember? He smiled faintly. Always the Empress. Always your wife, she replied. Inside, Joran sat with Glip, eating blueberry jam straight from the jar with a spoon. Think they'll make it? He asked. Glip beeped sadly, then mimed two birds flying apart. Hey, don't be a downer, Joran said. Love's messy, complicated, full of weird smells and bad decisions. But when it's real, it survives assassinations, rebellions, intergalactic fanatics, and my fashion sense. If that's not destiny, I don't know what is. Above them, the twin suns rose once more, casting golden light across the spires of Zenthri. The empire endured. The heart healed. And somewhere, in a quiet room filled with the scent of cinnamon and old books, a new chapter began. Not with a bang, but with a breath, a whisper, and the fragile, beautiful hope of tomorrow. The seasons turned in the Zenthri Empire, and with them, life bloomed in ways no ancient prophecy or royal decree could have predicted. Peace, once a fragile guest, settled into the heart of the celestial spire like a long-lost song finally remembered. The scars of war faded, not by forgetting, but by being honored, etched into memorial walls, spoken in quiet moments, taught to children not as tales of vengeance, but as lessons of healing. Empress Vera and Kalin did not rush their love back into the light. They nurtured it slowly, like a rare starflower grown from seed in the cold soil of sorrow. There were still nights when Kalin woke in silence, drenched in memories of the tomb beneath Zenthri, his breath ragged, his hands clenched. And there were mornings when Vera would hesitate before speaking his name, afraid he might vanish again like smoke in the wind. But each time one reached for the other. Each time they stayed. And so, on the anniversary of the day the cologne shattered and truth was reborn, beneath a sky painted in the soft hues of dawn, they wed. Not in the grand hall of echoes, but in the garden of whispers, where silver vines curled around arches woven from living crystal. No armies marched. No fleets hovered above. Just friends, family, survivors, and even a few former rebels who now served as peacekeepers. Joran Tully stood beside the Empress as her chosen witness, wearing a slightly too big ceremonial robe that Glip had insisted made him look dignified. He nearly tripped over the hem during the vows, but caught himself just in time, whispering, "No pressure, universe. Just don't let me ruin true love with clumsiness." Vera wore a gown spun from moonlight silk, its train shimmering with embedded stardust that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Kalin wore the reforged insignia of the shadow dagger, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. Protector, not assassin. Husband, not ghost. When they clasped hands and spoke the oath of return. A vow not to be perfect, but to always come back to each other. The entire garden burst into bloom, flowers opening midair, releasing glowing pollen that danced like fireflies in celebration. They moved into a quieter wing of the palace, near a sunlit courtyard filled with singing fountains and trees that bore fruit tasting like childhood memories. It wasn't the throne room. It wasn't the war chamber. It was home. And then, miracle upon miracle, life answered their second chance with abundance. The first child came quietly, a girl with her mother's silver eyes and her father's fierce calm. They named her Lyra, after Kalin's sister, who had become a beloved advisor and keeper of the lost archives. She arrived during a gentle rainstorm, the kind that hums against glass and makes the world feel hushed and sacred. Joran, who had somehow been appointed official godfather of emotional support, brought a basket of earth snacks, including a jar labeled Grandma Mag's Miracle Mist, child-safe version, which smelled faintly of vanilla and safety. The second was a boy, born under the twin eclipses, when the skies turned deep violet and the stars blinked in approval. He had green-tinged skin like his mother and a wild tuft of white hair that defied gravity. They called him Dane, meaning keeper of balance. He laughed often and loudly, and once tried to ride a palace drone like a horse. Security footage of the incident became an empire-wide meme. Then came twins, a brother and sister, born during the Festival of Lights, when the city glowed with floating lanterns shaped like constellations. They were inseparable from birth, communicating in soft chirps and shared dreams. They were named Nomi and Rin, words from an old Zenthri tongue meaning together and again. More followed, not all at once, but in waves, like seasons returning. 5 children in total, each unique, each cherished. The palace, once echoing with silence and duty, now rang with laughter, tiny footsteps, arguments over toy energy blasters, and bedtime stories told by a father who had once vanished into darkness but now refused to miss a single moment. Kalin, the legendary assassin, became known across the Empire as the most devoted father in galactic history. He taught his children how to move silently, not to kill, but to sneak extra desserts from the kitchen. He showed them how to track footprints, not for hunting, but for finding lost pets, usually robotic hamsters built by Joran. And every night, without fail, he tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and whispered the same thing. Asterisk, I'm here. I'm not leaving. Asterisk. Vera ruled with wisdom, but also with warmth. She shortened council meetings if Lyra had a school recital. She delayed interstellar trade negotiations because little Dane had made her a drawing of Mommy on a space dragon. She declared one day each month, No Rules Day, where palace staff, officials, and even visiting dignitaries had to wear silly hats and eat ice cream for breakfast. The economy did not collapse. In fact, productivity improved. Joran never returned to selling insurance. Instead, he founded the Department of Soft Power, a new branch of diplomacy focused not on weapons or wealth, but on music, scent, food, art, and emotional intelligence. His first initiative, Cologne for Peace, a program that trained envoys to use comforting scents during tense negotiations. It was mocked at first. Then it worked. Repeatedly. A war between the quartz moons was stopped because both leaders recognized the smell of their shared childhood nanny's lavender tea. He lived in the east wing of the palace, in a cozy suite filled with earth trinkets, peanut butter sculptures, and a shelf dedicated to honorary titles he didn't understand: Supreme Snack Ambassador, Keeper of the Jam Treaty. Glip remained his constant companion, now upgraded with dance routines and the ability to brew cocoa that heals minor heartbreaks. Years passed. The children grew. Lyra became a historian, determined to ensure no one else would be forgotten. Dane joined the Royal Guardians, not as a warrior, but as a peacemaker, resolving conflicts with empathy and the occasional well-timed joke. The twins opened the Galaxy Garden, a sanctuary where beings from all species could grow plants from their homeworlds and share stories beneath the stars. And through it all, Vera and Kalin walked together. They sat side by side on the sky balcony every evening, watching the lights of Zenthul flicker to life. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Their hands, aged now with veins like rivers on a map, remained intertwined. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon and the first stars blinked awake, Vera rested her head on Kalin's shoulder. "We were given more than we deserved," she said softly. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her silver-white hair. We earned it. One breath, one step, 1 cent at a time. Below, in the courtyard, their grandchildren played beneath the glowing trees, laughing as robotic fireflies zipped around them. Joran sat on a bench nearby, feeding crumbs to a cybernetic squirrel, humming the old lullaby. And high above, the galaxy turned vast and endless. But in that one small corner of the universe, where love had been lost, found, broken, and rebuilt stronger, the future was not written in war or conquest. It was written in laughter, in touch, in the quiet certainty of two hearts that had traveled through shadow and emerged, finally, into the light. Together,